introduction. Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square. And joining me, as always, on Tuesday morning is Edwin Eisendrath, who hosts It's the Democracy Stupid right here on Lincoln Square. Edwin has been a Chicago alderman. He's the former CEO of the Chicago Sun-Times, and he is part of the Lincoln Square family, and it's always great to talk with him. So, Edwin, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Susan.
Well, let's start with the story that you flagged about ABC News finally punching back against Donald Trump. I mean, we saw early on in Trump's presidency, they were one of the companies that settled their bogus lawsuit with Trump for $15 billion. As bullies tend to do, they don't back down. They just see more opportunities to get what they want. And we've seen Trump go to war with a lot of ABC talent, Jimmy Kimmel, The View, and now ABC is fighting back against a couple fronts that Trump has opened against them, where he's trying to meddle in them renewing their licenses with affiliates, even though they're not due for years to come. And he also, his FCC is complaining that The View has violated the equal time rule. So what can we learn from all this, Edwin?
Yeah, one more thing he did this week was threaten to have his goons that go out and arrest Jonathan Karl, one of their reporters, because he put his hand in the reflecting pool. So look, Brendan Carr, who is the head of the FCC, is a hack. And it is like everything else in this administration. It's a crooked agency out to do Trump's political dirty work, as opposed to the work of the people to regulate the airwaves. So anybody who doesn't, whose news isn't news that Donald Trump has been threatened and sued by either Donald Trump or one of his henchmen, and now the FCC is coming after The View. Oh my gosh, because the views on The View aren't always his view. So he's suing them. But this time, thank goodness, this is really a good news story, because another example of a criminal government doing criminal things on behalf of a criminal president isn't news. What is that people are standing up to it. Mm-hmm. And ABC, who caved earlier, in the Trump administration, is now going to put an ad out on The View saying, hey, I know you support this show, but say it loudly, because the FCC is coming after us because they want to determine whose views you get to hear. And that is a fabulous, they're going to put that on the air. That is a fabulous, I was just wondering what I could say on not the air here. That is a fabulous stick in the eye to the president and to this administration. And it is finally a major journalist organization saying, enough of your bullying. We're going to do our job. And I don't know what gave ABC the courage to do this after having caved earlier. Perhaps it's watching CBS lose its entire audience base by caving, but by its craven, folly with Barry Weiss in the leadership there, where they are truly saying news doesn't matter. News isn't truth. Truth is whatever the president tells us it is. And they're shedding their audience like crazy over there. So maybe that's what gave ABC the courage. But maybe it's that they've had enough of being pushed around and pushed around and pushed around.
I can't help but note that last week, Vice President J.D. Vance went on The View. And so if this is such a problematic show that's so awful and deserves to be shut down, it's kind of ridiculous, the idea that J.D. Vance would go on there to try and sell his latest book. I should say that if you watched J.D. Vance on that show, he got a tougher grilling from people on The View than he does on the Sunday talk shows. And he clearly was not having a good time. And so, kudos to ABC and The View for, standing up for journalism, because not everyone is. I think we should also note that this is not the only threat that Donald Trump has made lately. He also wants to sue the New York Times for $15 billion for treason, on top of his, further action against the institution. The New York Times also has not backed down from, they have not offered to settle. They're willing to push this case because doing your job and reporting facts, to call that treasonous is a huge slippery slope for this country, not just for the New York Times, not just for journalism writ large, but for the First Amendment and for what our democracy is supposed to be about. So we need more companies to stand up to Donald Trump.
Well, right. And when the mobster thug isn't in the White House anymore and doesn't have a corrupt Justice Department doing his bidding, we'll see how it stands when those lawsuits come the other direction. We'll see. He's not going to be able, no matter what who he pardons, no matter what the Supreme Court says, he is not going to be able to protect himself from the reckoning that's coming. America is going to say, I'm sorry, buddy, you ran the most corrupt presidency in American history, and you don't get to line your own pockets. That's just not the way it works. And we will find a way.
Yeah. You see the way that Donald Trump has responded to his reflecting pool renovation going awry, and the reflecting pool is greener than ever when it was supposed to be painted American flag blue. Like you put out last week, Edwin, it looks fairly similar to the Chicago River during St. Patrick's Day. Yeah. I mean, that's about as green as it can get.
Yeah.
But because Donald Trump cannot admit a mistake, he's blaming vandals. 5 people have been arrested. You have armed troops that are patrolling the reflecting pool, and he is so desperate to control coverage of this giant screw up that he's sitting there and lying to the press yesterday and saying somebody went after it with a knife. This is vandalism and we've got to catch these people, instead of saying, hey, I'm Donald Trump. I don't understand science. You know this about me.
I was thinking about the reflecting pool, and it reflects. And it just made me think, like, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? That from whatever that was, Snow White or what it was. Yeah, and it wasn't the person who was looking in the reflecting pool, and it's like Donald Trump wants everything to reflect well on him. And the truth is, the harder we look at anything he does, it reflects terribly on him.
Right. And that's why it goes after the media, because just reporting the facts does not give him the story that he wants. And so therefore, he wants to sue them into silence.
There's new reporting this morning. I heard that Donald Trump last week, I guess, or 2 weeks ago, drove his motorcade over the reflecting pool in order to talk about the job he was doing, and that is what probably damaged the paint job on the bottom. I mean, his ego is big enough to crush the paint on the bottom. So it's a fiasco, and it's a waste of time and money. And it's a metaphor because, his crooked Justice Department is still protecting him from the Epstein files. He is lying about this war that he started and lost, and signed a capitulation agreement in Versailles. He has no understanding of the pain Americans are going through from the increase in costs and everything that he caused. He chose to do this to us with tariffs and this dumb war. Some presidents fight hard to bring down inflation.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't care. He said he doesn't care.
Right.
So what's happening here is, sure, it's a very visible metaphor for the worst president in American history in every way, a disastrous president. And I guess the world is funny. It reflects badly on him, doesn't it?
But before we move on and talk about affordability and the Iran war and other headlines, I do want to put up the photo of the man who got the no bid contract from Trump for his paint job. I mean, when you're talking about metaphors with the reflecting pool, I mean, you cannot draw up a cartoon villain, corrupt lobbyist type better than this guy. And this is the kind of guy that Donald Trump does business with all the time.
So he's his neighbor down at Mar-a-Lago, which I'm hoping this picture wasn't taken in Florida because it's a pretty warm coat for Florida. But he's his Mar-a-Lago neighbor. He's a contributor, and Donald Trump steered him a contract that went over budget, that provided a bigger profit margin than would have gotten through normal contracting, and oh my, doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, everything he does is corrupt, and it doesn't do what he says it's going to do. So.
Yeah. Well, he's
being sued again, by the way, by to take down the diapers on the Kennedy Center, as I predicted that we'd have to sue the government to get that to come down. It's a completely lawless administration, completely. Which, by the way, a Minnesota judge said this week. Patrick Schlitz, who's a W point, he said that they have a well-established pattern of abusing criminal processes. That's what he said when he he quashed their indictments for Tim Walz and others.
Tim Walz, Jacob Frey, the Minneapolis mayor, and other officials. And this dates back to ICE's takeover of Minneapolis several months ago. And, Donald Trump has tried to go after his enemies repeatedly. And a bright spot in very rough times with this administration has been that the lower courts have almost always stood up. Charges against James Comey were thrown out of court. Tish James, he has repeatedly tried to go after his political enemies, and the law has held, and that's due to the work of a lot of really dedicated groups out there like Crew and Democracy Forward that are fighting them in the courts. Well, people like you and I have to show up at the polls and show up at rallies and fight them there.
One of the reasons why I said earlier there will be accountability. The courts have stopped him time and time again. But what have they stopped? They've stopped activity that is illegal. Mm-hmm. It's criminal, and he's doing it and he's being stopped. But there's never been a consequence. He gets stopped from doing it in Maryland, so he goes over and tries it in Arizona. Same illegal thing, right? He is a serial criminal. The courts have stopped him one time after the next. But this pattern is absolutely clear. He will break every law until he is forced to stop. And he continues to do it. He was stopped from creating a national voter file, which was always going to be illegal. He was stopped in part because when they took a look at what he's done, it's filled with errors. It would completely disenfranchise all kinds of people. DOJ stopped him from seizing voter data in Maryland this week. He's had a rough week in front of the courts. And now
but he's still trying to withhold Homeland Security funds from states if they don't, let him take over elections.
Yep.
If there's one thing you can say about Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and his administration, they are completely dedicated to this project of evil. They will not stop. They will try whatever they can do. And so, one thing that you and I have talked a lot about, Edwin, and I think it's very important, is that we need to get proactive when Democrats are back in power, whether, they take one house or the other or the presidency in 2028. We need to be proactive in what we need to do to preserve our democracy, because we have seen with Donald Trump how dedicated they are to trying to wreck it on every front, and that they have exposed a lot of weaknesses that we didn't know were there.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to rebuild that has to happen. And, probably starting with, setting aside that we must have accountability. We also must have a Congress that works. And there are a lot of steps that have to take to reform Congress. It's not just that we need a different party in charge in Congress. The Congress itself has all kinds of structural problems that have grown over the years. The committee jurisdiction doesn't match our economy anymore. The empowerment of leadership over committees means that, a few political decisions, really, their congressmen all has to vote on things they've never read or thought about. All of that stuff has to change. Maybe we need a bigger Congress. Maybe we need to elect them in different ways, but that has to happen. And of course, we need reform in the courts. The Supreme Court. But before we go there, it isn't necessary to wait only for the next election, because we are doing a good job of slowing down the worst instincts of the Stephen Millers. I mean, around the country, even without a majority in Congress, we have stopped some of the building of these terrible internal gulags. We've made them sell some of the properties that they bought for the purpose of these internal prison camps. Americans are doing what we do and doing it remarkably well, given that, as Trump says, we don't hold many cards. He holds the power cards,
right.
And yet we are stopping him left and right from destroying everything, which he would happily do.
Yeah.
We're not quite as physical about it as the good folks in, Croatia, who are, or no, it's not Croatia, it's Albania, who are pushing back on Jared and Ivanka's folly there. They're knocking over fences and rolling machinery down hills. We haven't quite taken it that far, but that's because we know we're going to get our day both in courts and in elections. They're not used to that in Albania, so they take a little more direct approach. And by the way, these powerful people who think that we might not have elections should know that Americans will be just as angry, just as violent, maybe more, because everybody's armed, if the legitimacy of our government is really gone.
Yeah.
If we have to take everything into our own hands this way, it'll be a terrible bloodbath, terrible. And hopefully we won't get there. But Donald Trump would take us there in 1 second. He would take us there. That's why it's so important to stop him going the way. And we are.
We saw what Donald Trump did when he lost an election, when he lost the 2020 election. What did he do? He fomented an attempted coup on January 6th, 2021. We've seen how far he will go. And, he is already taking tons of steps in the lead up to the election, because like everyone else, he can read the polls. He knows that Republicans are not set to do well, and he is terrified of any accountability for him and for his administration. And he thinks that the fastest way there is to interfere in our elections, whether it's making it difficult for people to vote by mail, whether it's sending troops and ICE agents to the polls. And that's something that we all have to be prepared for. And one thing that we can all do is to bone up on what the particular election laws are for our state, because elections are not decided, they're not administered at the federal level. They're administered at the state and local level. And so what the voting laws here in Michigan, where I live, are different from the ones, where you live in Illinois, Edwin. And, you should know what the rules are in terms of early voting, mail-in voting. And a lot of experts are telling us that if you can vote early in person, that's probably the best way to go, because, then you have less chance of interference. You don't have to worry about Donald Trump's postal service getting in the way. And so that's something,
by the way, a legitimate worry. He's ordered them not to deliver mail ballots from places.
Right.
It's a real problem.
Right.
Yeah, I think there will be cheating in red states. I mean, look, in the Texas primary that James Tallarico won down there, a big chunk of the state was disenfranchised when they moved polling places and didn't tell anybody.
Right. And in Tennessee, that was part of their gerrymandering, is to do the same thing. Yeah. It's a national playbook.
So we are going to see election fraud. It's not going to be in blue states that actually care about democracy. It's going to be in Texas. It might be in Tennessee. It might be in Florida, in these states where they will do anything to retain power, despite the popular will. So and we're, everybody is ready. We're watching it. The lawyers are watching it. I'm confident that we will have visibility into it, and that by and large, enough of the votes will be counted so that even though it won't be free and fair, we will win because Americans are determined to do it. I do worry about our Supreme Court. I mean, just the tone deafness of these people. Just today, they made another decision. You know, their long-standing effort, having nothing to do with Trump, but since the 1970s, the right wing has said, we need to make people less powerful and corporations more powerful. And today they made a ruling that people, can't sue individuals in the federal government for actual wrongdoing, but corporations can. It's just appalling what they think they're doing and how they think in this fraught moment, making, saying our government doesn't care about the people in this country could possibly be helpful in this moment when people are furious, rightly furious that the government has abandoned them, rightly furious that large parts of the government are no longer legitimate. It's a very dangerous time, and John Roberts is a fool on top of everything else.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump is heading to Pennsylvania today, and we've seen how he has tried to handle this affordability crisis. He calls it a Democrat hoax. He says he loves the inflation, and he's going to a key swing state, a state that he has won twice, Pennsylvania, and which will be a critical state for the midterms. And I think we have some footage of a business owner there in Pennsylvania and what he would like the president to do. Good luck.
What I would say to him is please have way more consideration for what small businesses can handle when instituting these policies, because we are not all his friends. We are not all billionaires. We don't all own a monopoly. And what we do have is a lot of folks working behind the counters trying to make ends meet. And when you institute tariffs, when you institute a war that nobody wanted, it impacts our bottom line and it impacts our ability to hire and pay our living wages.
What would Edwin, are you optimistic that Trump will
listen? They just asked a question, and he didn't say, the president's an asshole trying to ruin my life, which he could have said. Instead, he said, look, they're the policies. We live in a democracy. We want these policies to be helpful to us. They're choosing to be helpful to somebody else. That's not where we want to be in this country. I think Americans are thoughtful. I think everywhere Donald Trump is going to campaign, it can't help him. People will see how more enfeebled he is since the last time they saw him. They will see that he is even more unable to keep a train of thought for a couple minutes, and they will hear just plain crazy stuff.
Yeah. We also have a roundup of folks who are asked about Trump's reflecting pool debacle. And I thought that a lot of their responses were enlightening because they were talking about all the things they would like the federal government to be spending money on instead of vanity projects like that.
The pool was perfectly fine. We wasted all this money to, I guess, make it better, but it's not better.
It's a crazy scene. What a waste. I've been riding by this reflecting pool for decades.
I just can't believe that we are spending our money this way when there's so many higher priorities. Healthcare, childcare, closing the budget deficit. I mean, there's a million places we could spend this money.
We have tremendous amount of need in the country currently, whether you call it affordability or just the ability to pay your bills.
Again, the thoughtfulness and generosity of Americans is bottomless. I mean, that guy was standing there saying people are having trouble paying their bills. He probably wasn't talking about himself, there were a handful of people interviewed there. And again, not one of them said this egotistical maniac is wrecking our lives. They said, we want our government to do things for us, for the American people. And they said it with sadness and some hope. I mean, it's a really remarkable thing that this democracy is. And when we have a government that listens to its people, again, that cares about them even a little, we'll see we can do amazing things. We have proven in our history we can do amazing things. We have to get through this terrible fight.
Yeah.
I just love that. I mean, they were of all. I mean, if they interviewed me by that reflecting pool, I would not have been so kind, not have been so generous. You know, I'm past the there are better priorities, because I know the people in charge today won't do a thing for people who need health care, won't do a thing for people who are sick. They consider people with disabilities inhuman, as other ethno-fascists have in history. So I'm past that. They are better than me, these people who you interviewed.
Yeah. I mean, there is such a profound disconnect between the concerns that all of those people interviewed were expressing for, often you get the feeling it wasn't directly for themselves, but just for their fellow citizens, versus the bile that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth every time he's interviewed. It's all about him. It's all about his reflecting pool. It's about his ballroom. It's
His
about
airplane.
the bride plane from Qatar that he was bragging about last week, and it's about him and his concerns, and he's never been as disconnected from everyday Americans as he is, and he's just reveling in it. He's made our country's 250th anniversary into a celebration of himself. He's putting himself next to George Washington on our National Parks Pass. He's trying to take over our history, how we view our country, and make him an indelible part of the fabric of our country. And one of the things that I'm most looking forward to when Donald Trump is no longer president is yanking his name and his likeness off of everything that he has done, because he does not deserve this. Our country doesn't deserve that.
No, instead, he will be in museums dedicated to the story of American fascism, where he belongs.
As a cautionary tale.
As a cautionary tale. And as a tale of the amazing things we did to overcome it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is how little they believe themselves. Pete Hegseth pounded the table about religious freedom and said soldiers can opt out of vaccines because of their heartfelt religious beliefs. And then 220 of them got the flu at Lackland Air Force Base. At least
one of them died.
One of them died, right? And by the way, our troops aren't ready to fight if they're all sick.
Right.
Right. So we have a whole Air Force base that's now dysfunctional because they all have the flu. So you know what? They reversed this decision, and now they got to get vaccines. So much for heartfelt religious beliefs. It is all lies. It is all performative BS from these people.
Yeah, and it did. The article that I read right before we went on air, and I don't know if you've seen it from Status News, is that Eli Lilly gave compassionate access to a brand new weight loss drug to one 79-year-old patient. Guess who that was? Who gets special treatment from companies while the entire industry is being widely attacked by RFK Jr. I mean,
you and my bride Jennifer seem to have similar reading habits. I did not see this, but she told me about it right before I came down to do this.
It's a story. I recommend it.
Yep.
Yeah. But I mean,
tell everybody about it. I mean, the implication is that Donald Trump was given a drug that no one else has access to. By the way, that was true during COVID, when he was the first patient who got the antibody treatment. Otherwise, he could have died with COVID when he was president the last time. Now they've waived all the rules to give him a new drug. But if it is a weight loss drug, it is not working.
That was my comment as well.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps there were some drug interactions with some of the other medications he's taking prescribed by the 22 doctors who last examined him at Walter Reed.
Yeah, 22 specialists, which I don't know. I mean, I think that says to me they don't know what's wrong with him, that all these specialists are looking. I know what's wrong with him. He doesn't have a moral compass. He just doesn't have one at all. So
he's rotting from the inside.
Yeah.
And he's trying to cause our country to do the same. Well, before we end this, Edwin, we should talk about where we're at with Iran. we have Donald Trump, as usual, is just lying. The Strait of Hormuz is open, and they'll never get a nuclear weapon, promises that, he can't make good on. And by the way, there's nothing in the MOU that would prevent that. But here we are, we're, several days after he signed the surrender in Versailles. Talks were very tense over the weekend, led by J.D. Vance in Switzerland. There's some optimism now that, perhaps we'll pull this off. But of course, we have the wild card with Israel because they don't feel bound by this agreement. They don't want to stop attacking Lebanon. So what is your prediction for where we're going with this? Is the peace going to hold for this 60-day ceasefire, or is it all going to fall apart long before then?
Israel and Hezbollah have been at each other for decades.
Right.
I think Israel's behavior after October 7th was devastatingly overwrought, far more than even if you just take Israel's perspective, what's the best thing to keep that country safe? What they did was not right. It was a Bibi and Netanyahu, like Donald Trump, confusing target lists with strategy, right? And lots of innocent people died, and that is happening in Lebanon, a country I love. But if you are Israel or you are any country in the world, the United States signs a peace treaty and doesn't talk to you about it and says you're obliged to follow up. That is Donald Trump, the mobster, speaking.
Right.
That is not how you get anybody to say, like, if I were Israel or any other country in the world, I would say, that's great. They made a deal. Good for them. But they don't get to make a deal for me. So if you want to make a deal and you want me to be part of that deal, talk to me, get me part of the conversation. Yep. I get that. I really get that. And that is not to justify what's going on in Israel and Lebanon, is to say Donald Trump doesn't get to obligate the rest of the world just because he sees fit. Like he doesn't get to say, Edwin, you can't go out today. It's a beautiful day. You know what, Donald? Of course I can. You are not the guy you think you are.
Yeah.
And when you say, let there be light, you know what? You still have to walk over and turn on the light switch. It doesn't just happen. You're not that guy. So there's that piece of it. And I don't know whether there will be continued fighting. And that's really an interesting question, because Iran can say to Hezbollah, fire a missile. We don't like the way these talks are going. And knowing full well there will be a response, right? It's completely insane. So there's that problem. There is a problem that the team we've sent over is wholly ill-equipped to negotiate with Iran. We're very tough negotiators. They don't have the technical ability that we brought to bear when we did JCPOA in order to actually understand the deal we're making.
With PhDs and real expertise, as opposed to a real estate developer. Two of them, Jerry Kushner and Steve Witkoff.
Yeah, right. So there's and the patience to negotiate, which this administration doesn't have, because
patience equals
sound bites come quickly. Reality is harder to make. So I have zero confidence in them. Iran has, as Donald Trump would say again, they got the cards. Donald Trump just dealt them the hand that says you can control access to the strait. And let's say all those boats that are in there now filled with oil come out. That's great. There will be a return to the market of some oil. But do you think any ship captain, any ship company is going to send a boat back in?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they're desperate to get out. Right? But the risk calculation is a whole lot different if it's like I have an empty ship and I'm going to try and now send it back in to do this all over again when it took me a year to get them out.
Right.
He's done more for, non-fossil fuel energy than any president I could possibly think of. But that's only because his best friends are in the fossil fuel industry. And once again, being Donald Trump's best friend is not good for you.
No, because Donald Trump will only save himself.
Only save himself. And he's not even going to be able to do that now.
I thought it was interesting that Marco Rubio will be flying to the UAE, to Kuwait, Bahrain, our allies in the region. It seems like he's going there to try and reassure them after, so many of them have taken, missile fire as a result of our little adventure in Iran. But so far, I mean, what have these countries gotten for their trouble?
I don't know what he's doing. I mean, again, the American people are in the dark about American foreign policy.
Yeah.
Is he there on a, we're sorry we did this to you, I need to rebuild relationship tour? Is he there to say, oh, you know what, 2 years ago, we promised we were rebuilding Gaza. Could you help us? Could you help us with that? Because that's gone nowhere. He certainly, I cannot believe he's dumb enough to go there and say, we need you to invest in Iran. But they have trying to get a big fund to invest in Iran. But they are not, I mean, we are allied with them, but they are furious with us.
Yeah.
Furious, right?
Because, we have obviously the immediate problems with trying to keep this tenuous peace in Iran, but this war went way beyond the borders of Iran, way beyond Lebanon. I mean, a half a dozen Gulf states got embroiled in this, and that's not something that you can easily put back together.
Well, during the war, our advanced military assets protected Israel from some of this bombardment.
Right.
We failed to protect Saudi Arabia. We failed to protect Kuwait. We failed to protect Bahrain. The Israelis actually were working to protect the UAE. Right, but we didn't. Right, we didn't. So it's not lost on them. So their calculation is this: okay, we get it. You'll protect Israel and not us.
Mm-hmm.
But then the president of the United States calls turns his back on his ally in Israel, and now they're fighting with each other publicly. And the president is saying, swearing at him in public. So that the leaders in the Middle East, this is not something they're used to, right? They're used to. The king is the king. The crown prince is the crown prince. You treat these people with respect. Your word is all you have to go on. So they're watching Donald Trump, and the only ally he tried to protect, he's now saying you're scum of the earth. Why and having this fight, and they're going like, wow, we can't do. You can't trust these guys. You can't make a deal with these guys. You can't do business with these guys. We are going to look elsewhere. And America's place in the world is, and by the way, it isn't just the folks in that part of the world who've watched this fiasco.
Right.
America's place in the world is far worse off.
Right.
Not just because we fought and did not win this war, but because the comportment of our president, his treatment of our allies, his inability to, for 1 second, consult with them about what he does before he does it. It is, all of it is damaged America's place in the world.
Yeah, and one of the big winners, whether it was the actions that they've taken down in South and Central America with Venezuela and with murdering people on the high seas, between that and Iran, look at how empowered this has made China. Look at the agreements that China has been able to make with several of our once allies, because they look like a stable economic force as opposed to the United States, which was for a century or more. And again, this is not something that we can put back together again.
No. It shows you what it means to have a good president, really, because Donald Trump is the best president China's ever had. Right? The best president China's ever had. And it's done great things for them, but not so much for us, and think about it. This is a country he threatened with 30%, 50%, 100% tariffs. And they said, we're calling that bet, buddy. We're calling that bet. And he's just backed off. And now the tariffs are illegal. And now he's empowered them all over the world.
He went on a trip there and posted a bunch of propaganda of him and Xi. Yeah.
So they're stronger than ever. And I want to say, go to a different part of the world, but it's still America in the world. It looks like Europe and Ukraine working together are going. Ukraine is going to survive this Russian onslaught. I mean, the terrible fighting in the Donbass right now again, with Russian missiles that we are not offering Patriots to protect Ukraine. But Ukraine it looks like it's going to survive this war. Something that people did not know and did not believe would happen. Biden didn't believe it when he offered Zelensky a path out of the country the day it began. And Zelensky said, no, I need missiles. I'm here. I need rifles, whatever he said. But the fight for freedom on the planet is now a fight that America's not, we're irrelevant to that. And that has been our identity. That has been something that is a burden we have proudly carried since forever, since our founding. We have been the country that cares about human freedom, that fights tyrants and fights people who invade each other, because that's what we do, because we stand on the side of freedom and equality and liberty.
And
we learn
Trump, we switch sides.
We switch sides. And that doesn't mean that fight doesn't go on. It goes on all over the world. It's just going on without us.
Yeah.
And this was something that Republicans banged the table about. They remind us, and they didn't care about it at home so much, but at least in foreign worlds, they reminded us about this all the time. And now they're hiding under their desks, and saying, please, Donald, protect me. Shame on all of them.
Yeah. Well, Edwin, I appreciate you being here as always. And thanks to all of you for joining us as well. And make sure to catch Edwin's show. It's The Democracy Stupid on Friday afternoons here on Lincoln Square.
Got a good one coming up. So I'll see you Friday.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.